The seat she paid for as the flight reached cruising altitude. Vanessa continued documenting everything: interactions, timing of service, expressions, and passenger behavior. While the other VIP guests received attentive service, she was left alone, except for Maya, who occasionally offered quiet kindness in small, meaningful ways. Vanessa knew the deeper test wasn't about the water or the towel. It was about values. Across the aisle, two older businessmen whispered and pointed toward her. One of them shook his head with a sneer. "Cutting corners these days. First class isn't what it used to be," he said loud enough for her to hear. Brenda nodded subtly at them while passing, confirming their judgment without a word. That was when Vanessa made her final note for this flight. Bias does not need violence to hurt. It only needs silence and compliance. Suddenly, a ding echoed above. The cockpit was requesting Brenda. She walked swiftly toward the front, where Captain Wells stood just inside the cockpit door, his arms crossed. He looked troubled. "She's not who she says she is," Brenda said in a low, agitated tone. "That woman she must have pulled some trick. I think she's lying about her seat. There's no way a woman dressed like that." The captain raised a hand to silence her. "You're sure she's not part of the audit team?" Brenda scoffed. "I guarantee it. I know the type. That woman didn't even get a welcome drink. She doesn't know how to act first class." But Wells didn't look convinced. He turned to the co-pilot. "We can't afford to offend the audit team if she is someone. Double-check the manifest after takeoff." Back in the cabin, Vanessa leaned back in her seat, quietly watching Brenda's every move. From her seat, she could feel the undercurrent of desperation, not just because they wanted to remove her, but because they feared being watched, and she was watching all of them, recording, evaluating. 30 minutes later, Brenda approached again, this time with artificial calm layered poorly over her anxious energy. "Ma'am, I just wanted to double-check your seat. Could I see your boarding pass once more?" she asked, the fake smile not reaching her eyes. Vanessa handed it to her with a blank expression. Brenda studied it again, then forced a laugh. "Looks like it really is you she said, then leaned down slightly and added, "Though I'm not sure how you got that seat, or if it was fair to the others." That was it. Vanessa had reached her line. She placed her phone in her lap, looked up slowly, and in a firm but composed voice said, "Miss Brenda, would you prefer that I explain how I got this seat now, or would you like to wait until landing when the rest of your crew can hear it too?" Brenda froze. I don't know what you mean." "I think you do," Vanessa said, voice steady. "I think you know exactly what you've been doing since I stepped onto this plane. And I think your captain knows as well." Brenda's mouth opened, then closed. "I suggest," Vanessa continued, "you start treating every passenger as if they might be the person who signs your paycheck. Because one day they might be." And then Vanessa pulled out a silver card from her pocket, not her boarding pass, not her ID, but a sleek corporate authorization badge bearing her name. Vanessa, a Mitchell Chief Executive Officer. Skyline Airways Group. Brenda gasped audibly. Nearby passengers turned to look. For the first time in years, Brenda Morris was completely speechless. Captain Wells emerged from the cockpit, alarmed by the sudden silence. Maya trailed behind him, eyes wide. "Is there a problem here?" "The captain asked. Vanessa stood up from her seat calmly, turned, and faced the first-class cabin, holding up the badge. "No problem," she said. "Only a surprise. You've been expecting the CEO's audit team." "You've been hosting her all along?" Gasps rippled across the rows. A businessman spilled his coffee. Maya clutched the curtain at the galley, stunned. Captain Wells blinked. "I'm Vanessa Mitchell," she said. "And this isn't just an audit, it's a wake-up call." Brenda stepped back, pale and trembling. I didn't know." "I thought you thought wrong," Vanessa interrupted. Then she turned to the rest of the cabin. "For the next few hours," she said to everyone, "I'll remain in this seat, and I will continue my evaluation. But when we land, your entire leadership team will be receiving a full report." Then she sat back down. The cabin fell into an eerie silence. For the next 20 seconds, no one dared move. Only Maya, steady, kind Maya, stepped forward again, Would you like that warm towel now, ma'am?" she asked, soft and genuine. Vanessa smiled. "Yes, and thank you for seeing me when no one else did." And as Maya walked to prepare the towel, the plane flew through quiet skies, but inside, everything had changed. This flight would be remembered, not because of who was served champagne, but because of who refused to be judged and stood up. In the sky, when the curtain drops, the truth arrives. The silence after Vanessa Mitchell's quiet reveal wasn't just awkward, it was transformative. Every breath in the first-class cabin seemed to carry the weight of realization. A few passengers adjusted in their seats, trying to pretend they hadn't judged her only moments ago. Others turned their heads toward the windows, ashamed of how quickly they'd joined the invisible chorus of assumptions. Captain Wells, still standing near the cockpit, looked like he had just flown into a storm cloud, uncertain, alert, but dangerously aware that the turbulence ahead wouldn't come from the sky. And Brenda, who had spent the better part of the last hour micromanaging luxury napkin folds and polishing wine glasses while trying to force Vanessa out of her seat, now stood frozen, stripped not of her uniform but of her control. She had misjudged, misstepped, and misunderstood the most important woman on the flight. Her lips moved, but no apology came. Instead, she gave a strained, choked nod and quickly retreated behind the galley curtain. The cabin had returned to its normal hum, but something beneath it buzzed with tension. Maya Rodriguez, still shaken from the reveal, handled herself with grace. She moved quietly through the cabin, fulfilling requests, topping off beverages, but all while glancing back toward Vanessa with a quiet reverence. She had seen something. Most employees never did a leader who didn't need a title card to claim authority. A woman who sat in silence and still shook the system. Vanessa remained still, watching everyone. Not with malice, not with pride, but with the steady eyes of someone taking notes not just on service, but on character. In her mind, she had already started forming the phrases that would define the next phase of the airline's transformation. Her phone remained in her lap, locked now, because the real work of observation needed no recording. The truth was already branded into her memory. As the aircraft glided smoothly at 35,000 feet, Captain Wells returned to the galley where Brenda stood with trembling hands and a dry throat. "What happened?" he asked in a low voice, the kind used between soldiers after a battle. Brenda swallowed hard. She's the CEO, Vanessa Mitchell. She showed me the card." Wells stared at her for a long moment, saying nothing. Then, finally, he exhaled. "You spoke to her the way you did." "Knowing we were under audit?" Brenda's lip quivered. "I didn't know, sir." You thought, Wells cut in, voice sharp, "that she didn't belong? Because of how she looked?" Brenda's mouth opened again, but nothing came. "You're not the only one," he added, as if trying to share the blame, but even that sounded hollow. The weight of the mistake was hers, and everyone knew it. In seat 2A, Vanessa thought back to the words her mother once whispered when she was 11 and crying after being mistaken for a shoplifter in a grocery store. "The world will not always see who you are. Sometimes it'll only see who it's afraid you might be. But that's why you rise, baby. You rise so high they can't ignore your truth." She had risen. She had fought through years of silent slights, of being doubted, of being overlooked in boardrooms where her ideas were quoted only after a man repeated them. And now she was here leading an airline and sitting in a first-class seat she'd paid for, but still having to prove she belonged. But the most painful part wasn't what they did to her, it was knowing they had likely done it to others. People without the power to speak back. People who hadn't gotten the chance to reveal a CEO badge. And that's why she couldn't stay. Silent. 2 hours into the flight, Vanessa pressed the call button. Maya appeared almost immediately. "Yes, ma'am?" she asked, voice soft. Vanessa didn't speak loudly, but her words landed like glass against concrete. "Could you please ask Captain Wells and Miss Brenda to join me here for a conversation? I believe it's time." Maya nodded once, wide-eyed, and disappeared. A few passengers nearby straightened in their seats, sensing the shift in the air. Again, within minutes, both Captain Wells and Brenda appeared at her row, Brenda's eyes red-rimmed, The captain's jaw clenched. Vanessa gestured to the two empty seats across from her. "Please," she said with professional calm, "sit." Captain Wells obeyed, stiffly lowering himself into the seat. Brenda hesitated, but eventually sat, hands folded tightly on her lap. Vanessa took a long pause before speaking. "Do you both understand the depth of what happened today?" she asked, tone direct but not angry. "Yes, ma'am," the captain replied quickly. Brenda nodded but still couldn't meet her eyes. "This flight was flagged for audit," Vanessa continued. "Not just for catering or timing or mechanical precision, but for culture, for dignity, for how human beings are treated even when no one's watching. Unfortunately, what I saw today tells me we still have a long journey ahead." Brenda tried to speak then, voice trembling. I didn't mean to insult you, ma'am." You didn't insult me," Vanessa cut in. "You insulted every black woman who's been dismissed, every passenger who doesn't wear a designer label, every customer who just wants to fly in peace without being sized up by your prejudice." Her voice never rose, but her words struck harder than any raised tone could have. "I understand the pressure," she added, softening slightly. "I understand you thought a certain image mattered. But let me be very clear. At Skyline Airways, our image begins with inclusion, not exclusion. If you can't treat every single passenger with equal dignity, you are not fit for leadership. You're not fit to carry the brand I represent." Captain Wells cleared his throat. "Miss Mitchell, I take full responsibility. I should have stopped this. I knew there was tension, but You let it happen," Vanessa said. "And you let someone else be humiliated under your watch. That makes you accountable too." Brenda's hands began to shake. She tried to speak again. "I've worked here 25 years. "Then you should have known better," Vanessa replied. "You should have been teaching the new generation what respect looks like, not the opposite." There was a long silence, and then Vanessa took a breath. "I'm not here to fire you mid-flight," she said. "I'm here to teach you something, because that's what my mother did. That's what leadership means. But when this plane lands, you will both receive follow-up. A full report will be submitted to HR and the Ethics Committee. And I expect full cooperation, understood?" "Yes, ma'am," the captain said, eyes downcast. Brenda's voice cracked as she whispered, "Yes." Vanessa nodded and stood. "Good, then go back and finish this flight with the professionalism you should have started with." They both stood and left quietly. Maya, who had been watching from the galley, stepped forward. "That was powerful," she said softly. Vanessa smiled, the first real smile since boarding. "So was your kindness. Never underestimate how much it matters." When the aircraft finally began its descent into Chicago, the mood in the cabin had shifted entirely. First-class passengers who had previously ignored Vanessa now offered sheepish smiles and subtle nods. A few tried to make polite conversation, but she responded only with grace, no grudge, no spite, because that's what real power looks like. Brenda resumed her duties with robotic precision, quiet and subdued. Maya, however, became a quiet star, her service impeccable, her heart shining through every small action. When the landing gear touched down, the aircraft rolled along the runway, not just into an airport, but into a reckoning dot as passengers stood to disembark. Vanessa remained seated for a moment. She watched as business travelers grabbed their expensive carry-ons, as Brenda stood at the cabin door with forced cheer, as Captain Wells stood outside the cockpit like a statue. And then, as the last passenger walked past, Vanessa rose, adjusted the strap of her backpack, and walked forward. As she reached the exit, Brenda whispered, "I'm sorry again, Miss Mitchell." Vanessa paused, looked her in the eye. Then, "Don't be sorry," she said. "Be better." She exited the plane without a dramatic exit, without cameras, without security. Just a woman with a purpose. On the other side of the jet bridge, two Skyline executives who had arrived to welcome her frozen shock. "Ma'am, you took the flight yourself?" one of them gasped. Vanessa handed him a folded document. "Yes, and you'll find my report inside. Tell the board this isn't just about policy anymore. This is about transformation." She looked back once at the aircraft door behind her. We're about to change everything. The boardroom doesn't fly at 35,000 feet. The headquarters of Skyline Airways gleamed beneath the morning sun like a polished promise glass, steel and sky reflections dancing across its modern architecture. From the outside, it was a temple. To progress, built to show the world how far the company had come, but Vanessa Mitchell knew better. She had walked through those marble-floored lobbies in designer suits and in jeans, had listened to polished speeches and hollow apologies. She had sat in boardrooms with men who called her articulate, and women who pretended not to see the condescension baked into every "you've come so far." And now, after years of climbing, she was done playing pretend. It wasn't just about customer service anymore. It was about the air they breathed as a company. And that air, polished or not, was suffocating the very people they promised to serve. Inside the executive conference room, 12 members of the Skyline board sat around a table so long it seemed to stretch into another time zone. Some tapped on their tablets. Others whispered about earnings reports and quarterly projections. They weren't expecting Vanessa to arrive early, and certainly not alone. But when she walked in wearing the same navy blouse and jeans from the flight the day before, the room shifted. A few eyebrows raised, a few glances exchanged, but no one dared speak first. She took the seat at the head of the table, not with arrogance, but with the calm authority of someone who had earned every inch of that space. "I trust you've all read the report," Vanessa began, her voice steady and controlled. "If not, I suggest you read it now, word for word." The room remained quiet as a few executives reached for printed pages, flipping past introductions. To the main content, Vanessa waited. She wanted them to see it with their own eyes. The direct quotes from Brenda, the summary of biased treatment, the timeline of discriminatory actions, the quotes from passengers, and most importantly, the clear failure of leadership oversight. "This wasn't a one-off," she continued. "This wasn't just a flight attendant having a bad day. This is the reflection of a system we built, one that says who's worthy and who's not based on what they wear, how they look, or how much they blend into an image of what we think success looks like." One board member, a middle-aged man named Harris Caldwell, cleared his throat and adjusted his blazer. "Vanessa, with respect, this sounds serious, but surely this doesn't represent the majority of our employees. We've spent millions on diversity training, equity seminars, and we've got policies in place. Policies don't matter if no one enforces them," Vanessa interrupted. "And training doesn't matter if leadership models the opposite behavior. Tell me, Harris, when was the last time you took a commercial flight in economy?" He blinked. I don't know. Maybe 3-4 years ago?" "Exactly," Vanessa replied. "We've insulated ourselves. We've convinced ourselves that because we sit in corner offices and sponsor cultural events that we're doing enough. But what happens in first class, in the galley and the gate line? That's where our brand is truly defined." Across the table, board chairwoman Meredith Choi, a sharp-minded former diplomat who had once fought to bring Vanessa into the C-suite, leaned forward. "So what's the solution?" she asked. "We need a plan, not just a diagnosis." Vanessa appreciated the clarity in Meredith's voice. It was rare in these meetings. "The solution," she said, "starts with accountability, not just at the gate, not just with flight attendants, but with management. Every single executive will now be required to fly at least twice a quarter incognito, one domestic, one international. No upgrades, no assistance, no pre-notice." The room buzzed with murmurs. "We will relaunch the True Sky initiative, not as a PR campaign, but as a silent audit program monitored by independent observers. I'll personally review every report. I want names, I want tone, I want passenger feedback, not just metrics." Another board member, an older white woman named Denise Langston, frowned. "And what about those employees who are simply afraid of change, or who feel threatened by this approach?" Vanessa didn't blink. "Then they're welcome to leave. This isn't about comfort, it's about culture. If we're going to claim to be the airline of the future, then we need to act like it. That means removing the rot now before it becomes terminal." Meredith nodded. "What about Brenda Morris and Captain Wells?" Vanessa folded her hands. I've already submitted the HR review. Brenda will be placed on administrative leave, pending mandatory anti-bias retraining and a formal evaluation by the Ethics Committee. Captain Wells will be required to undergo cultural leadership training and will be suspended from international flights for 6 months. But neither are being fired. This caused some confusion in the room. Why not? Asked Harris. You just said this was systemic. Vanessa leaned forward, her eyes narrowing slightly. Because I believe in transformation, not just punishment. They made mistakes, serious ones, but they're not alone. If we fire them and do nothing else, we send a message that scapegoats are more important than systems. I want a new culture, not a clean headline. The room grew quiet. This wasn't the fire and forget response they expected. This was deeper, bolder, and riskier. Vanessa stood, then slowly, deliberately. You all hired me because you said you wanted change, she said. But change is not just a tagline. It is not a day slide in an earnings report. It's hard. It's uncomfortable. It means some of us in this room will lose privileges. But I promise you, if we do this right, we won't just save face. We'll save lives. Because dignity isn't optional at 35,000 feet. It's oxygen. And right now, some of our passengers are suffocating. With that, she gathered her files and exited the room. Not another word. No debate, just truth left behind like a trail of wake turbulence. Later that week, Vanessa returned to her private office on the 36th floor. From the glass window, she could see the skyline of the city, planes coming in and out of view in the distance. Each one carried hundreds of live strangers, stories, sorrows, dreams. She wondered how many of them would feel seen today. She turned as a knock echoed on the door. Come in, she said. Maya stepped inside, wearing a simple black dress with her hair pinned neatly back. She looked nervous but determined. You asked to see me, ma'am? Vanessa smiled gently. Yes. Maya, sit down. Maya sat across from her, hands folded tightly in her lap. I read your passenger record, Vanessa said. 0 complaints, excellent reviews. And after last week's flight, your actions stood out in a way that went beyond protocol. Maya swallowed. I just did what I thought was right. Exactly, Vanessa replied. And that's why I want you on the new audit training team. You'll be helping train our next class of cabin crew leads. I believe leadership starts from the heart, and you showed more heart than anyone else on that plane, Maya gasped, eyes wide. Me? I'm just a junior attendant. You were, Vanessa said with a smile. Now you're more. Welcome to the next level. Maya covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. I never thought anyone noticed. The world sees what it wants, Vanessa replied, but leaders see what matters. Outside, the company's PR division released a quiet statement. Skyline Airways is reimagining its commitment to equality. We believe in listening and learning and leading by example. But Vanessa didn't need applause. She didn't need news headlines or trending hashtags. She only needed to know that the next time a woman like her walked onto a plane in jeans and a backpack, she wouldn't be asked to move. She'd be seen. She'd be respected. And if not, someone like Maya would be there. Because justice doesn't arrive with noise. Sometimes it walks in quietly and orders a flight audit. Turbulence begins below the clouds. The days following Vanessa Mitchell's boardroom confrontation moved like a storm front across Skyline Airways. For many employees, it felt like the calm before change. For others, it felt like a warning. Her speech had rattled the corporate tower, not because it was loud, but because it was true. She had dared to name the invisible systems no one else would touch: bias in service, judgment by appearance, comfort with discrimination hiding under polished brand values. Her True Sky initiative had not only been approved by the board, but immediately announced with internal bulletins, press statements, and executive commitments. The program, simple in language but revolutionary in impact, required every executive from C-levels to department leads to fly twice a quarter undercover. The mission, to experience what their customers did. No platinum access, no fast-track lounges, no gate agent handshakes, just real travel. and it shook the company like an earthquake under the runway. Inside the press office, the communications team scrambled to shape the narrative. Public statements had to walk a fine line acknowledging internal reform without admitting fault that could expose the company legally. External media outlets picked up Vanessa's name fast. Black CEO. Orders secret flight audits, read one headline. Skyline's new boss takes first class apart, said another. Her inbox flooded with interview requests, Forbes, Bloomberg, even talk shows, but Vanessa declined everyone. She wasn't doing this for applause. She was doing it because she remembered what it felt like to be invisible, and not everyone supported her. Inside the investor relations department, murmurs turned into closed-door meetings. Some high-level shareholders, particularly those who cared more about quarterly profits than company culture, were worried. They whispered about optics, about public backlash, about the risks of alienating loyal premium clients. One shareholder, the influential Mark Ellison, even contacted the board privately, questioning whether Vanessa was too emotional to lead a global airline. What happens if someone records an uncomfortable flight experience and it goes viral? He warned. Our value drops overnight. It wasn't concern. It was fear disguised as logic. But the danger wasn't in the suggestion. It was in how many agreed. Vanessa wasn't naive. She had seen resistance before. At 26, when she suggested overhauling the outdated training modules for crew safety protocols, she was told she was too green. At 32, when she proposed new routes into underserved regions to boost community trust, a senior VP rolled his eyes and said, "That's not where the money flies." And now, at 38, despite being CEO, they were still calling her too much, but that only made her stronger. If they feared change, it was because they had benefited from the status quo. Her office, usually a space for calm strategy, had turned into a war room. Reports from the first week of audits poured in. Some were good, some were shocking. One report detailed how a gate agent in Denver routinely skipped greeting non-white passengers by name. Another showed how a crew member on a New York to London flight offered champagne only to guests in suits, ignoring two women in traditional African dress seated in the same cabin. Vanessa read every page, highlighted every moment. She didn't flinch. This was why she had started this. The rot was real, and it was everywhere. Then came the anonymous tip. Late one evening, while Vanessa sat reviewing reports at her desk, an encrypted email appeared in her inbox. The subject line read, "For your eyes only, culture breach from within." The message was short, but explosive. There are department heads deliberately instructing staff to bypass audit team flights. Passenger manifests are being leaked internally to pre-warn crew. You need to check flights 4429, 7705, and 3811. Leadership is undermining your mission. You trusted the wrong people. Anonymous Vanessa stared at the screen, her heart suddenly beating harder. If it was true, then her entire initiative was under attack from within. Someone or multiple people were trying to make it all look perfect on paper while hiding the truth behind the curtain. That wasn't just disloyalty. It was sabotage. And it proved something deeper, the real enemy wasn't rudeness or poor service. It was comfort with injustice. She didn't tell her assistant. She didn't even call security. Instead, she stood, grabbed her coat, and left the office alone. It was 10:47 p.m. The night air outside felt cold against her skin, but it steadied her thoughts. She got into her black sedan and pulled away from headquarters, not toward home, but toward an address she hadn't visited in years, the maintenance compound by the airfield, where the old hands still worked, the people who'd fixed the engines that kept her childhood dreams flying. The place her father once called home. The gates to the compound buzzed open when the guards recognized her. Inside, the lights of hangar 6 glowed in soft yellow. A man in oil-stained overalls stood near a large rolling toolbox, examining a schematic. His white beard caught the light as he looked up, stunned. "Vanessa?" he called out, voice deep, warm, and familiar. "Is that you?" "Hi, Mr. Lyle," she said, smiling for the first time in hours. He approached, wiping his hands on a rag. Well, I'll be damned. What brings the CEO to the grease pits? I need to remember what it felt like to work where no one was watching, she said. To be seen not by title but by heart. He looked at her closely. What happened? Vanessa paused. Someone's leaking information? Sabotaging our audits? Pretending change while fighting it in secret? Lyle didn't ask for details. He didn't need to. He placed a firm hand on her shoulder and said, You fight it like we fix a broken engine, bolt by bolt, part by part, you find the leak. Then you seal it, not with noise, but with precision. She nodded, holding back emotion. Thank you. You're doing good, baby girl, he said. Don't let 'em scare you out the cockpit. The next morning, Vanessa quietly launched Phase 2 of the initiative. Code Starling, no announcement. No press. She personally assigned a trusted team of anonymous evaluators, former employees, retirees, consultants, even frequent flyers to fly the flagged flights mentioned in the anonymous email. No paperwork, no digital trail. Just paper notes, verbal debriefs, and observation. What they found confirmed her worst fears. Flight 4429. A senior supervisor at JFK had sent a warning text to the crew 2 hours before takeoff, urging them to clean it up today, eyes may be on you. Flight 7705. 2 passengers in economy, 1 black and 1 Asian, received no greeting. While white passengers were thanked by name, the purser claimed it was just an oversight. Flight 3811. A lead flight attendant altered her badge name and avoided standard service scripts to avoid being identified in audits. Vanessa held the reports in her hands and knew one thing clearly: this wasn't fear. This was rebellion. Her next move had to be big. She summoned every regional director to a closed-door meeting at the Skyline headquarters. The invitation was blunt: attend in person. No Zoom, no delays. When they arrived, they found not a boardroom, but the old aircraft simulator bay, now empty, repurposed for the meeting. Folding chairs were arranged in a circle. No titles, no podium. Just truth. Vanessa entered last, still in jeans, still herself. She walked to the center of the circle and looked around. You know why you're here? She said. Some of you have failed me. Some of you have protected the wrong people. Some of you are still pretending nothing needs to change. She paused, letting the silence dig its roots deep into the room. This isn't about a flight anymore. This is about our soul, and I will not lead a company that lies to itself. She held up the anonymous audit report. You think you can hide it? You think I won't find out? But I see everything. And I remember everyone. She then walked to a whiteboard and wrote 5 names, only 5, each one a high-level manager, who had either leaked information, manipulated audit routes, or lied about it. She circled the names, then turned to the group. Effective immediately, they are suspended. Full HR and ethics review to follow. Gasps filled the room. Some looked stunned, some angry, but most looked relieved. And if you think I'm bluffing, try me, she added. But if you're ready to build something better, start today. There was a long pause, then a man stood. Older, weary, but with eyes full of conviction. I've worked here 28 years, he said. I've never seen a leader walk into the storm like this. Another voice joined. Then another, and one by one the room shifted. Not with applause, but with commitment. Because when the air clears after a storm, the sky always looks different, and under that sky, something new was finally taking off. She's not causing a scene. She's surviving 3 weeks after. Vanessa Mitchell launched Phase 2 of the True Sky Initiative. The ripple effects had grown into waves across the airline industry. Skyline Airways was no longer just a company, it had become a symbol. News outlets that once whispered about internal audits now screamed headlines about transparency, dignity, and leadership. Competitor airlines scrambled to revise their internal protocols, while university professors began assigning Vanessa's public statements in ethics classes. Some called it bold leadership. Some called it unnecessary turbulence. But no one dared say it wasn't working. Employees who had long felt unseen, especially those in uniform, began walking taller. Quiet crew members who once whispered their concerns were now speaking openly in meetings. And gate agents, once known to skip over names with accents they didn't understand, were now being trained to ask, "Can you kindly help me pronounce your name correctly?" Small changes. Big impact. But in the middle of this growing wave, a quiet storm was forming that Vanessa didn't see coming. And it started not in a boardroom or a hangar, but in row 18C. On Flight 1517 from Dallas to San Diego, a flight like any other. Ordinary passengers, full economy section. A few upgrades in business class. But at the back of the plane near the lavatories sat a young black woman named Camille Johnson with her 6-year-old son, Yalan, curled up on her lap. Camille was a single mother. She worked 2 jobs, one at a daycare and another at a hospital cafeteria. This was her first flight in years. Her cousin was getting married in San Diego, and Camille had saved for months to afford the trip. She packed peanut butter sandwiches and juice boxes for Yolene. She read over the baggage policies 3 times to make sure she didn't get charged extra. She even arrived 2 hours early because she wanted everything to go right, but on that day, everything went wrong. The trouble began mid-flight. Yalan, who had an undiagnosed sensory condition, began to cry quietly when the turbulence picked up. Camille cradled him gently, whispering soft words, trying to calm him, trying not to disturb anyone. But a woman, seated across the aisle, well-dressed, white, and clearly annoyed, leaned over and snapped, "Can you get him to shut up? Some of us are trying to rest." Camille apologized, rocking Yalan harder, pressing him into her chest like armor. "He's just a little scared, ma'am," she said. "I'll calm him down." But the woman rolled her eyes. "That's not my problem. If you can't control your child, maybe you shouldn't fly." A nearby flight attendant, overhearing the raised voice, approached. Her name was Denise, and Denise didn't ask questions. She didn't ask Camille what was wrong. She didn't bend down to check on Yalan. She just looked at Camille's hoodie, her faded jeans, the plastic sandwich bag, and said with coldness, "Ma'am, we've received complaints. I'm going to ask you to calm your child, or we'll have to involve the crew supervisor." Camille's heart dropped. "Please, he's okay. He's just frightened. I promise we're not trying to cause trouble." But Denise wasn't listening. She walked away. 10 minutes later, a senior flight attendant came to her seat and crouched low. "Ma'am," he said, less cold but still impersonal, "we've had multiple complaints about your behavior. We may need to move you upon landing." "For a discussion with airport authorities?" Camille blinked. "My behavior? I haven't done anything." Her voice cracked with panic. She held Yalan tighter, and tears welled in her eyes. "Please, please don't make this worse. He's just scared. He doesn't like loud places." The word authorities had pierced through her. She was one of those people who lived her life carefully, never stepped out of line, always said yes, sir, and no, ma'am, even when people were unkind, because she couldn't afford to make mistakes. She was black, she was poor, and she knew how the world worked. But here she was, being accused of disrupting a flight because her little boy cried during turbulence. And no one cared why. The story would have ended, "They're just another flight." Another humiliation if it hadn't been for a young man in business class who had recently become part of the True Sky Initiative's junior audit team. His name was Elijah Chun, 27, first-generation Chinese-American, and raised by a mother who once worked 3 jobs to put him through college. Elijah had joined Skyline's ethics division because he wanted to make a difference. And when he heard Camille's quiet voice trembling behind him, something told him to turn around. What he saw broke his heart. A mother holding her son like he was made of glass, shaking as if every breath might crack the world around her. He stood, walked to the galley, found Denise. "I'd like to file an onboard report," he said calmly. Denise blinked. "About what?" "About racial bias," he replied. "And about the mistreatment of a mother who has done nothing wrong." Her face changed. "I'm an authorized silent auditor from the CEO's internal initiative," he continued. "And what I just witnessed is unacceptable," Denise stammered. I didn't know. That's the point," Elijah said. You never know who's watching, but you should always care who's hurting. When the flight landed, Camille was not pulled aside. Instead, Denise was asked to remain on board for questioning by the ethics liaison, and by the time Camille stepped out into the San Diego airport terminal, she was approached by a woman in a Navy suit and a Skyline badge who said, Miss Johnson, the CEO would like to speak with you personally, if you're open to it. Camille froze. Why? Because she believes you deserve to be heard. 2 days later, in a private conference suite inside Skyline's West Coast regional headquarters, Camille sat across from Vanessa Mitchell. Yalan was asleep on a sofa nearby, a coloring book still open in his small hand. Camille wore her nicest dress, a navy blue one with tiny white flowers. Her voice trembled as she told Vanessa everything. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I really didn't. He's just scared sometimes. I didn't know how to make it stop. Vanessa listened. Every word. She didn't interrupt once. When Camille finished, there were tears in her eyes. I was that child, Vanessa said softly. Scared, misunderstood. My mama held me the same way. We flew coach too. And sometimes people looked at us like we didn't belong. Camille looked up, surprised. I want you to know, Vanessa continued, that you do belong. And more importantly, you were failed by people who should have protected your dignity. Camille covered her mouth, trying not to cry too loudly. Vanessa reached across the table and placed an envelope down. This is a lifetime priority pass for you and Yalan, free flights, anywhere Skyline goes. And this, she added, placing a second folder down, is a full scholarship program we're launching next month named after my mother. It's for single mothers working 2 jobs who dream of more. You'll be the first recipient. Camille blinked in disbelief. I don't know what to say. You already said it, Vanessa replied. You just didn't think anyone was listening. Then she stood, walked to Yalan, and gently adjusted the blanket on his shoulder. We're changing the skies for him, she whispered. 1 flight at a time. Back at headquarters, Vanessa called an emergency ethics committee meeting. Denise was suspended indefinitely. But again, Vanessa didn't stop with punishment. She ordered a full review of onboard response protocols for passengers with neurodivergent children. She commissioned a new training module called Silent Storms, recognizing struggles you cannot see, and most of all, she wrote a memo that went viral across the company. It began with, the child crying in row 18C is not a threat. He is not a disturbance. He is not a problem to be moved. He is a child. The woman holding him is not disruptive. She is surviving. Let us not confuse dignity with compliance, or silence with peace. From this day forward, Skyline will serve every seat, not just the quiet ones. The message traveled across terminals, lounges, crew rooms, and customer inboxes, and in time, so did the change. The Sky remembers everything. A month after Vanessa Mitchell's memo shook the culture of Skyline Airways from the inside out, a storm she had not expected began to rise on the horizon, not in the clouds, but in courtrooms and headlines. It started quietly, like most fires do. A blog post from a former employee, then a local news segment, then a civil lawsuit filed under sealed records. The headline that finally caught national attention read, Skyline CEO accused of discrimination by former mentor race, revenge, or reckoning? The article alleged that 10 years ago, when Vanessa was still climbing the corporate ladder, she had replaced a long-serving white executive in the operations department. The man, Harold Whitman, now claimed that she had used reverse discrimination to remove him. He alleged she manipulated performance reports and retaliated against him because he once said she was too ambitious for her own good. Vanessa stared at the headline on her office monitor, her jaw tight, fingers motionless on the desk. She remembered Harold well. He wasn't just a colleague, he had been her mentor for the first 3 years of her management career. He taught her how to build a staffing grid. He helped her decode flight delay metrics. He brought her coffee before board presentations. And he also subtly, silently reminded her of her place, like when he'd once called her one of the good ones in front of other managers. or when he told her to avoid getting labeled. Angry after she challenged a sexist remark in a meeting. She had once admired him, then she'd outperformed him. And the board, seeing the numbers, made a choice. She got promoted. He did and single quotes did. Now, years later, he was rewriting the story. The lawsuit claimed she created a hostile environment for legacy leaders. Vanessa knew what that meant. It wasn't about justice. It was about discomfort. About people losing comfort with a black woman in power who didn't shrink. She could have stayed silent. Let legal handle it. Let PR write the response. But that wasn't her way. That had never been her way. The fight was no longer about one flight, one seat, one insult. It was about history. And how memory shapes the sky. 3 days later, Vanessa held a private meeting with her legal team, ethics director, and board chairwoman Meredith Choi. The mood was heavy. Lawyers advised caution. We should settle quietly, one said. Avoid media trial, but Vanessa didn't flinch. If we settle, she said, we say I don't belong. And I fought too hard to let someone rewrite my story with fear, Meredith nodded slowly. Then what do you want to do? Vanessa looked around the room and said, I want to speak. In public, in full. I want to tell the truth, not just for me, but for every woman who's been told to wait her turn, smile smaller, and sit in the back seat of her own brilliance. And so she did. She requested a national television interview. Not for vanity, not for drama, but for clarity. And because she knew sometimes justice has to be seen to be believed, the network agreed. It aired live, no edits, no cuts, just a black woman in a blue dress sitting under studio lights with tears in her voice and steel in her spine. When I started at Skyline, Vanessa told the interviewer, I had no power. I was a flight attendant. I was overlooked, passed over, talked down to, but I stayed. I learned, I rose. I rose without shortcuts, without favors. And when I was promoted, it was because the data spoke louder than the discomfort of people who weren't ready for me to lead. The interviewer asked gently, and what about Mr. Whitman's accusations? Vanessa paused. Looked straight into the camera. I never removed him. The numbers did. And his pain isn't about injustice. It's about change. Change is painful. But it's not wrong. That clip traveled faster than sound. Millions watched. Some cried. Some cheered. But none forgot. Meanwhile, inside Skyline, the seeds of her leadership bloomed in ways even she hadn't predicted. A new training center opened in Atlanta, named after her mother, Lakshmi Mitchell Academy for Ethical Aviation. It focused on conflict resolution, service without bias, and recognizing invisible disabilities. The first class had 200 trainees. Over half were women of color. One of them, a young trainee named Shiren, approached Vanessa after the ribbon cutting. You're the reason I applied, she said. My mom cleaned planes her whole life. She died before she could sit in first class. I want to fly for her, Vanessa embraced her gently. Then carry her spirit in every aisle, she said. And never let anyone tell you your wings don't fit the cockpit. Even within the corporate offices, something new stirred. The old reward system based on punctuality and appearance was being dismantled. In its place, a new evaluation model emerged, one that measured empathy, cultural intelligence, and accountability. For the first time, frontline workers had the power to review their supervisors. Managers had to prove not just performance, but humanity, and then came the final test. One late evening, Vanessa received a handwritten letter, no email, no signature, just one line, you changed my life and you'll never know how. Row 14B, flight 2276, the day you watched, I saw you. No return address, no name. Just that line. Vanessa searched the passenger records. She found a single mother named Diana Reyes, traveling with a daughter who had a visible birthmark on her face. The mother had been bumped to coach after a gate mix-up. Another passenger had made a comment about circus passengers boarding early. That day, Vanessa had watched it happen in silence. She remembered the girl, remembered the shame in the mother's eyes. She had flagged it in her report. 2 weeks later, the rude passenger had been banned. Diana had been offered an apology. and voucher. But apparently it had meant something more. Vanessa folded the letter and kept it in her coat pocket. Because leadership isn't always about what people see you do. It's about the quiet lives you lift when no one's looking. 6. Months after the lawsuit began, the court dismissed the claims. Harold Whitman's story unraveled under cross-examination. Former colleagues testified that Vanessa had saved his job more than once, had gone above and beyond to be fair. The judge called the suit an attempt to weaponize discomfort against merit. Vanessa didn't celebrate publicly. She just took a flight the next day. Economy, no escort. No fanfare. She sat in 21A, beside a teenage girl who was flying alone for the first time. The girl had braids, a nervous smile, and big dreams. They talked about college, about becoming a pilot, about not fitting in. Before the flight landed, the girl asked, "What do you do for work?" Vanessa smiled softly. "I try to keep the skies honest," she said. And as the plane descended, lights twinkling beneath the wings, Vanessa looked out the window and whispered to herself, "This sky remembers everything. The silence, the shame, the rise, the roar, and now it remembers us." Because dignity was never about class. It was always about courage. And now, thanks to Vanessa Mitchell, it flew freely, seat by seat, aisle by aisle, heart by heart.